Hello and welcome. It's been a while, quite a while, since I've uploaded any kind of produced content on my channel. Things have been a bit up in the air, it's got to be said. Nothing that's like destroying my life or anything like that, but I've got kids and, they get older. They need rooms of their own, and yes, as you can see, I'm no longer in my man cave. The man cave is gone. My room has now gone to my daughter. It is her bedroom. But here I am in my living room, now making the first piece of content in, 2 months? But yeah, here I am. Let's go. I've decided I'm going to be looking at all of the Star Trek movies. I'm going to go through them. I don't think I've ever reviewed a Star Trek movie on my channel, if I'm being perfectly honest. I don't seem to recall ever reviewing one. So yeah, it's been a while since I've gone through them, and I felt like doing so. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Starting with, of course, Star Trek the motion picture, or as I like to call it, Star Trek the slow motion picture, because of course it is a very slow moving film, and we will get to that. But yeah, a little bit of background first in terms of me and my, where Star Trek fits in my universe, and then a little bit of background into the film itself. But yeah, for me, Star Trek, I wouldn't say I'm the biggest Trekkie. I couldn't ever claim to know, the ins and outs of everything to do with Star Trek, but I have seen all of Star Trek, the original series, back when I was a kid, not watched it as an adult. I've watched all of the movies multiple times. I did watch all of Next Generation, Deep Space Nine and Voyager back when they aired on television, so they were kind of like a regular mainstay for me as a teenager, kind of growing up. I haven't seen anything after that. I've not seen any of the new stuff, Discovery, whatever. I started watching Picard, but for whatever reason, I didn't carry on watching it. Not necessarily that it was bad, although it didn't particularly feel like Star Trek to me either, for many reasons, but I'm not going to go into that because I'm not here to talk about Picard. It's just a bit, that's just to let you know where I'm coming from in terms of my knowledge base, in terms of my fandom. I would say I'm a Star Trek fan in the loosest of senses, in which, if it's on, I will watch it, and I wouldn't mock anyone who's a Trekkie, because I understand why they're Trekkie. I understand the love for something like Star Trek. I choose to put my love into other things because I've only got so much of it to go around when it comes to TV shows. So for me, I was always like the X-Files guy and a few other shows like that. But yeah, in terms of sci-fi, I understand its appeal. I do love the concept, and I've always been particularly enamored with the movies. From Wrath of Khan onwards, they were a constant feature in my household. So that's me. As for the film itself, Star Trek the slow motion picture, sorry, I can't help myself, I always refer to it as that. It was released in 1979, and that was 10 years after the original series had ended. So obviously, we'd had Star Wars in 77, so Star Trek ended in 69, and then sci-fi was, I don't really know where sci-fi was at, to be honest, in the period between 69 and 77, but certainly when Star Wars came out in 77, there was a resurgence in, space operas, things like that, and obviously it was prime time at that point to go back to the Star Trek well. Let's bring essentially the king of sci-fi at that point, which is Star Trek. Let's bring it to the big screen. Let's kind of ride on the success, really, of Star Wars and bring back an old favourite for the big screen. Now, anyone who came to this kind of expecting something of a Star Wars ilk, not really knowing Star Trek from the series from back in the 60s, I would imagine they'd be very disappointed. Not necessarily with Star Trek fans. I do think that this film, if you're a Star Trek fan, like an absolute, proper Trekkie, I think, and I understand why as well, why this movie would appeal. why it would be right up your street. It is essentially like an extended episode of the TV show. It covers a lot of the same ground that the TV show did. You know, the show was always like a thinking man's sci-fi. It dealt with real issues, real world issues, racism, bigotry, things like that, and kind of addressed those issues within the context of this brighter future that was laid out upon the Enterprise, in which people of all species and all colours and all genders could, come together and explore the universe together. So I think this film is essentially just, it's carrying on that. It is essentially the show as a feature film. So I totally get why me calling it the slow motion picture would rub a proper Trekkie the wrong way. So when I do say that, if you're a proper Trekkie, please do understand I only mean that in jest. I don't mean it to insult anybody's kind of fandom of this movie. You like what you like, and it's not to say that this movie has no value, because I do actually think it's a good film. Now it does follow this story of a probe, or so it's like a weird kind of thing that comes. It's heading on a collision course with Earth. Basically, it's inside a massive cloud. We open up on the film in which these Klingon ships kind of confront it and get taken out, and then the Enterprise is essentially the closest ship to this thing, but it's being refitted, retrofitted, basically. In a dock just off planet Earth, so it's not even ready. It's not fully ready. It's still being kind of repaired and stuff. So, but because it's the closest ship, it has to go out and investigate this probe thing, this whatever this thing is that's heading straight for Earth. And of course, with Kirk, who is now an admiral, back in the show was Captain Kirk. With him being the most experienced in terms of the Enterprise and what it could do, and the 5-year mission that he went out on in that show, he's the logical choice to take over the crew of this ship and go out there, even though there is another captain who is supposed to be going out on its new maiden voyage. It kind of rubs him the wrong way a little bit that Kirk comes in and takes over his ship. So yeah, there's that kind of conflict there going on between Captain Kirk, or Admiral Kirk, and the new captain of the Enterprise. And then you add to that, you get all the old crew members coming back. You got Dr. McCoy, you've got Spock, who ends up coming back for his own reasons. And then the film really is this, like a slow burn movie about what is this thing? Why has it come to Earth? How can we stop it? Because it is a terrible destructive force. Some of the things that it can do. What's its agenda? And that's it. That's the film. It's what it's about. Now, like I say, I do think that is a story that would fit quite well within the context of the show. I could imagine that being an episode, being wrapped up a lot quicker, a lot tighter. I would probably prefer it, I think, as an episode. I think if you condense everything that happens in this down into one episode, it would make for an incredibly solid episode of the original series. But as I say, unfortunately, it's a movie, so they stretch it out to 2 hours, just over 2 hours. I do think that running time stretches it a little bit too much. I think this could have been an hour and 40 minutes easily, particularly in the back end when the Enterprise is making its way through this thing, through this cloud with all this machinery inside. Now, on the plus side of going into this thing and taking our time with it, I do think it really does convey the monstrous scope of what this thing is. This life form, this mechanical life form. It seems to be like an AI, really, that they're kind of going into the heart to. When you see the Enterprise as just this little tiny dot kind of making its way into this thing, the scope of that it conveys is quite terrifying. Just to look at. So I appreciate that. And I think from a visual standpoint, there's some really cinematic visuals here. Now, the film is directed by Robert Wise, who is no slouch. He's been nominated for 2 Best Director Oscars. No, one. Sorry, he won 2 Best Director Oscars for West Side Story and The Sound of Music. So again, like I say, no slouch. And in his former life, before he became a director, he was an editor, and he was the editor on Citizen Kane. So again, and he got an Oscar for that. So the dude wasn't just some randomer they pulled in. When they decided to take the show to the cinema, they were taking it seriously. They went with talent that was, tried, true, and tested. So I definitely think you can see that here. I think Robert Wise treats this not as just some slumming it job. Oh yeah, let's take this sci-fi show from 10 years ago to the cinema and just crank something out. No, I can tell he's taking it seriously. He's taking his time with the story. He's making it mythic in scope, and I do appreciate that. I just think sometimes he gets lost in it. I think sometimes he lingers on things far too long. I get that what it conveys and whatnot, but I think we could cut some of that time down immeasurably. Like I say, I watched the director's cut for this. I think it was like 2 hours 10 minutes. It easily could get this to an hour and 40 and make it really tightly paced. The opening 20 minutes of this movie, when you boil down what actually happens in the opening 20 minutes, there's not that much. We have the opening confrontation with this thing by the Klingon ships. They come, they find it just destroys them. And then we have Spock on his homeworld of Vulcan, kind of going through this ritual, which we're not able to follow anyway because they're speaking in Vulcan and there's no subtitles, or at least there wasn't on the version I was watching. So I rented it on YouTube, and there was I even tried putting the subtitle function on to see if it would tell us what they were saying in English, and it didn't. So we've got this 5-minute sequence, it seems like, in which they're speaking to each other in Vulcan while Spock's supposed to be doing this ritual thing, but we've got no clue what they're saying. And again, I get it. It's like we're there. This is what it'd be like to look at an alien culture where we don't understand what they're saying, and we have to look at the body language and figure it out. I get that, but again, the amount of time that scene lasts, it's like, okay, so that's it. You got those 2 scenes, and then we go from there to Kirk, kind of, making his way to the Enterprise, getting on board the Enterprise, kind of meets up with Scotty, and the two of them make their way to the Enterprise on this shuttle, and they fly around it. And it's this scene which is supposed to give you the scope and the grandeur and the majesty of the Starship Enterprise. We're flying around it, and we appreciate it the way that Kirk appreciates it because we're looking at it. But it just goes on and on and on. They swing by this thing and they come round the other side, and then it looks like they're going again. And I think what Wise is doing here, I think he's influenced quite heavily, I would say, by 2001: A Space Odyssey. And I think he's trying to take that awe and grandeur that 2001 kind of used to look at the sci-fi tropes, to look at space and the unknown of space, and just make us feel really tiny in this universe. He's using all of that stuff and kind of pointing it towards the Star Trek universe. But like I say, that's 20 minutes. The opening 20 minutes is just those few scenes, essentially 4 scenes that I've told you about. And you get to it and you're like, blimey, 20 minutes of screen time has gone past, and literally this is all we've had. On paper, that's not much. So the pacing is definitely off. That's a word a lot of people use a lot, particularly in the movie reviewer YouTube community. A lot of people say pacing without actually explaining just what is wrong with the pacing. If I'm going to use it, I like to say what is actually wrong with the pacing, and that's the problem. It's essentially 4 scenes, maybe 5 scenes that at most is 10 minutes of screen time. On the page, you think of 10 minutes of screen time, but it's just dragged out. It's eked out for every single ounce of life that they can get out of it, to the point where it actually starts to die. Like I say, it does look beautiful, though. It does look beautiful, and it is nice to see these characters back. But yeah, we get into the story anyway, and I think there's a lot of really good character stuff in here that kind of picks the movie up a bit. We've got Spock as he's, I appreciate that a lot of the characters here, even the characters that are only introduced in this film and are only for this film, they're not mainstays from the series. Even they get arcs. Like a lot of characters get arcs. They each have their own story, and you've got Kirk kind of learning about himself, that actually he was never meant to become an admiral. He was never meant to give up the Enterprise. That's not where his heart lies. His heart lies with the Enterprise, and he knows he wants to stay there by the end of the film. And it's like, and we know by the end of the film he is staying there if it's the last thing he does. And then you got Spock, who's like, we learn that the ritual that he was partaking in was this final ritual to cleanse himself of all emotions and become an entirely logical being. And the film is all about, him learning that, well, that's not good. Just logic in and of itself it's not going to get us far. And that speaks volumes to me, because I feel like, as a man of faith, I feel like to just look at things purely in terms of logic kills any true meaning, any true value in the things of this world that actually have value, because of how they make us feel, and because where they point us to morally, and morality doesn't always work in terms of logic. The age-old question about, do you kill one to save the many, or this, that, and the other, which is a question that's actually going to come up in the next film, which is interesting. But you think about that question in terms of like logic and things. Morality doesn't always work purely in terms of logic, because if that one is a friend, then suddenly feelings come into play, and it ain't so simple. So looking at Spock in this way, in terms of like, should he completely purge his emotions and become just a purely logical being, the questions that raises for us as humanity, and in terms of where we're going, or where we think we're going, in the age of reason, in the age of the Enlightenment, in which we have to look at everything through the lens of logic. It's actually quite a destructive force. If you remove the emotion from the logic, then you really do remove something that makes us human, that makes us who we are. It's not something you can just carelessly discard. So I like all that stuff in the film. Again, it takes a while getting there. I also really do like the reveal, the twist at the end. I'm not going to reveal what that is in case you've not seen the film, but I like it. I like the idea of behind that, and how it's put forward. I don't necessarily think it's conveyed in the best way towards the end. I kind of left scratching my head to some of it. There's certain things that happen with one character and this other woman where it's wrapped up with them, and I'm like, okay, that just seemed to happen, and there's no real explanation as to what just happened there. We kind of get some surmising with Kirk, like where they kind of procrastinate a little bit and like just give a little Basil exposition, but it's not exposition that's entirely satisfying in terms of truly explaining what just happened. You kind of just got to fill in many of the blanks yourself, but I kind of get it. I kind of get what they were doing, where it went. But given that they spend so much time, as I say, floating through this thing and seeing all these majestic scenes of the Starship Enterprise just like looking like a pin flying through this machine, they got to cut a lot of that time down and actually put more into explaining what actually happened at the end there, in terms of what happens with a particular character, and how they're, like I say, I can't really say much more than that without spoiling it. But yeah, I like this film. I like the dynamics, the character dynamics. As I say, seeing the crew come back, it does take Spock a long time to get to the Enterprise, and for those dynamics to start reworking themselves. Seeing the relationships like between Kirk and Dr. McCoy, and you know, like Dr. McCoy and Spock, they always had a tentative relationship between them because Spock was always purely logic, and McCoy was always more of an emotional kind of man. So they would obviously rub up against each other. It was more McCoy rubbing up against Spock because Spock's kind of like nonplussed about it. He's just like, whatever, I'll just stick to logic. You're not offending me kind of thing. Whereas it was McCoy who would always take offense because really it's him who has the issues. So all that's in there, you know, they start working all that stuff in there again, and it's good to see. I do like the music for this film, particularly the main theme, the main Star Trek film theme. I came to this movie like well after the others. I'd always like kind of watch Wrath of Khan onwards, and I'd never really got to this one until my late teen years. And as I say, it kind of put me to sleep. A bit older now, I can kind of appreciate things a bit more. So I was able to, you know, appreciate this on various levels. One of those levels was the music, but like it never occurred to me that the score for the opening of Star Trek: The Next Generation was actually from this original movie. It wasn't the Next Generation theme. It was the Star Trek movie theme. So yeah, I appreciate that. I do like Jerry Goldsmith's score here. It's quite a rousing score. I like Stephen Collins in this as Captain William Decker. So as I say, he's the new captain of the Starship Enterprise, or he's meant to be until Kirk kind of usurps him. But Kirk keeps him on board as a advisor and whatnot, because obviously this being a new version of the Enterprise, this guy's been working on it since the beginning, so he kind of knows the systems a bit better than Kirk does, even though Kirk doesn't really want to admit it. But he kind of proves that he does at various points in the film, and he proves himself to be a valuable asset. And I understand where he's coming from as well. You know, it'd be easy to kind of write this guy off and say, you don't deserve to be in charge of the Enterprise. Kirk's the main man. He had it for 5 years. It's like, who are you? But, you know, if I was in this guy's shoes, you know, I've worked my way up through Starfleet. I want, you know, this is the position I've worked for. I finally got there. I've been here for months and months, like overseeing the work of the ship as it's been refitted, and then just as we're about to go out, boom, the old captain comes back and just wheedles his way in. I'd feel irked by that, you know, if that was me. So, you know, as much as it's easy to kind of root for your boys, for the crew that you've followed throughout the 3 seasons of Star Trek, I can understand where this guy's coming from. He never feels to me like a villain or a character that they've put in there purely to create this tension where he's supposed to be the douchebag and Kirk's going to show him how it's really done. No, actually, he proves himself to be of value. He proves that, you know, Kirk does need to change his approach sometimes. He needs to look at things a bit differently and not assume that he's the man all the time, and that actually he can learn from other people and take advice, and I think that's what this character brings. So I like him. I like how he's played. I'd say I like how Collins plays him. He's got just the right amount of kind of sass and backbone without kind of veering over into prickishness. So yeah, I like him as a new addition to this team, to the crew. The other new crew member here is Lieutenant Ilya, played by Ursis Lambata. Yeah, sorry, butchered that name. Got that completely wrong. But she's effective in. She has to play 2 characters really. So she plays this person who's got like an emotional connection to Collins's captain, and then partway through the film, she becomes a probe. She becomes the vessel of this thing that they're going into, that they've got to make contact with. So she has to play it slightly different from then on. Now, I can't say I've seen her in anything else before, not to my knowledge anyway, not unless, you know, she's been in something I've not even realised it's her. But I feel like she's adequate she doesn't blow me away or anything. She does what needs to be done. There's a lot of voice work done through like audio work to make her sound more computerized. I think she's probably mostly chosen for her legs. I don't know. It's a yeah. The moment they can get her into a costume where she's all legs, it's like, there you go. She doesn't give a bad performance or anything. It's just, I could imagine many an actress, many a newcomer come in, taking this role on, doing what she does, and it works fine. She just happens to have a cracking pair of legs. It's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of pacing, in terms of like my interest level, I would say. But as far as just a standalone movie, I'd say it's actually all right. It's good. It's solid. There's definitely better to come. If you've never seen the Star Trek movies before, and you do want to go through them, don't let this one put you off. You know, if you start from the beginning, you decide, you know what, I'm gonna work my way through them. I'm gonna start with the motion picture, and you start with it, and you're like, seriously, don't let that put you off. It's this first movie is something of an anomaly within the Star Trek movie universe. The pacing, the style, everything about it is just, it's kind of jettisoned by the next movie, to be honest, and they go in a different direction. And I can understand why some Trekkies might feel a little bit betrayed by that, I guess. But I think for the general movie-going audience, people who aren't versed in Star Trek, who just come to a movie, they want to be entertained, they want a bit more action, they want it to move along quite nicely, then I think the movies that come after this are definitely more for a general audience. They're definitely Star Trek movies as well. I think Trekkies, definitely will get a lot out of each of the movies, depending on your taste. But I think this movie, the motion picture, is, out of all the Star Trek movies, is definitively the one for your pure Trekkies. You know, your ones who watch everything Trek, read everything Trek. I think they're the ones who will probably get the most out of this. Me, as a casual Trek fan, I appreciate it. I'm happy to have watched it. I'm entertained by certain aspects of it, but I probably won't be rushing back to it anytime soon. So yeah, that's just me though. Yeah, what about you though? Have you seen all the Star Trek movies? Have you seen this one? If so, what do you think about that difference in tone between this and the rest that are to come? Would you have rather the Star Trek movies kind of stayed within this kind of wheelhouse, this kind of tone? Or are you happy that they changed tack with Wrath of Khan? Just in general, let me know your thoughts on this movie down in the comments section. Also, please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Share this video as well. If you enjoyed this review and you want someone to see it, it would greatly help this channel if you share the content. Share it with friends that if you know someone who likes Star Trek, someone who's a movie lover, share this with them because it would help this channel to grow for sure. So yeah, thank you for watching anyway, and until next time. Cracking.